All right, we begin tonight back in Minneapolis. The city's still reeling as authorities try to make sense of an attack that left 2 children dead and 18 people injured. Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. The number of people harmed in a horrific shooting at a Minneapolis Catholic school church has gone up from 17 to 18. That includes 15 children, some of them as young as 6. The gunman shot at those children through stained glass windows as they prayed. Police audio from the moments right after the shooting give us a sense of the sheer horror on the ground.
And Minneapolis police dispatched to medical. We have 2 gunshot wounds, 2 patients with gunshot wounds to their head in front. There's also a critical patient in the rear of the church.
We had one victim brought out to us in the ambulance. We have a 9-year-old patient. I'm going to come check in with you quick.
Transporting one 10-year-old male, red trauma, gunshot wound to the head, Minneapolis Children's. He is very vitally stable, possibly was just grazed.
That last part you heard there, a 10-year-old child grazed by a bullet to the head. Hospital workers confirmed that several of the children they treated had wounds that could have killed them. Authorities are still trying to understand what motivated 23-year-old Robin Westman to do something so demonic. And the gunman left plenty of clues. Right now, Minneapolis police and the FBI are sifting through pages and pages, hundreds of pages, and a so-called manifesto, much of which was written by Westman shortly before the attack. The shooter appears to have been an equal opportunity hater. He left vile messages against Catholics, against Black people, against Mexicans, against Jews. He wrote how Israel must fall and how 6 million Holocaust deaths were not enough. He wrote, "Kill Donald Trump" on a rifle magazine. Now, deranged shooters don't just snap overnight. In this case, like so many others, there were red flags for years. A former friend from 7th grade says even then he would praise Hitler and talk about, quote, filthy Zionist Jews. That friend will join us in just a moment live on our show. She says Westman often wrote in code so nobody could understand his writing. And that would explain the Cyrillic alphabet used in his journal, whole pages talking about suicidal thoughts and feverishly praising previous mass shooters. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said this afternoon Westman appeared to be obsessed with them.
This is an individual who, unfortunately, like so many other mass shooters that we have seen in this country too often and around the world, had some deranged fascination with previous mass shootings, and he fantasized about the plans of other mass shooters.
Those past mass shooters include the monsters who carried out the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting and the Aurora Theater shooting in Colorado. Those names were scrawled on a loaded magazine used in yesterday's attack. But through the scattershot screeds, there was one dark obsession that the gunman held dear: killing children.
The shooter wanted to kill children. The shooter wanted to watch children suffer.
And he knew exactly where to find children. The shooter had attended the Annunciation Catholic School. He knew that Mass would be taking place that morning with all those kids in attendance. He meticulously planned out the attack, even drawing diagrams of the church layout in his journal. He sprayed bullets through windows shortly after Mass started. He wasn't able to get into the church because the church had locked the doors when the service began, as was the regular practice to do. That small action likely saved many, many lives. But the terror was still all too real for those children inside the church once the shooting started. One neighbor described to ABC News how he ran in and saw boys and girls shot in the head and neck. One of them asked him to hold their hand. NewsNation's Brian Enton has been on the story all day long. He joins us now live from Minneapolis. Brian, what have you been able to find out?
Yeah, we're outside the church right now, Elizabeth. It has been so highly emotional in a way that I can't describe, and we cover so many, unfortunately, of these mass shootings, but this one just feels different, I think, because it's a church, because there's the kids. You heard that one little boy talking about how his friend dove on top of him to protect him from the gunfire. The little boy who protected him is still in the hospital. We got an update on him today. He's still recovering. He was actually shot in the back from the shotgun. So you just think about these little kids on what they went through, and just the evil and the hatred that existed within this shooter. What we learned today, it is hard to wrap your mind around. I don't think we're ever going to get a clear motive because he hated so many people, but they said overall, this was the acting U.S. attorney, that more than anything, the shooter wanted to kill children, that he wanted to watch children suffer, that was something that was repeated over and over again, and they now have thousands of pages of his writings. They did several search warrants here in the Minneapolis area and are continuing to go through all of his journals, that he hated all groups, blacks, Christians, Jews, Mexicans, appeared to hate all of us. That's the way the acting U.S. attorney described him. And what's interesting is he had no criminal history, Elizabeth. So he never once popped up on the FBI radar, and he had no issue buying the guns. He was able to buy all of these guns legally. There were 3 guns that he used here at the church. We learned today, actually, the handgun, there was a live bullet in the handgun, and the handgun apparently jammed during the shooting. So he could have actually shot more people. Thankfully, the handgun jammed. And lastly, I want to show you, we have pictures now of the outside of the church where you can see these windows. And this is important because it explains to you the way this went down. There are these skinny windows, you see them there, that line up along the church, and the pews are actually adjacent to the windows. And the chief said the shooter knew that. So his plan, what he did is he went up to the windows and he started shooting through them. And he couldn't even see the children because they're so narrow, but he knew, the chief said, that the pews lined up with the windows, and if he shot through those windows, that he would be able to hit the children. The whole thing is on video, too. There's actually a surveillance camera right there, so they'll be able to go back and go over it all. And actually, one last thing I just thought of that I wanted to tell you, Elizabeth. The mother, the shooter's mother, who worked at the church, and worked here for quite some time, we asked about her today, and the police chief said, and he worded it this way, that they have not been successful in talking to her yet and have not been able to interview her. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I was watching that press conference, and I was struck by that too, Brian, because that would be, you would think, the very first person police would be reaching out to be more than 24 hours past this awful event, and they still have not managed to speak to her, raises a lot of questions. I'm sure we'll get answers to them soon. Brian Enton reporting live from the scene where this awful tragedy happened. Thank you so much. My next guest knew the shooter, Robin Westman, or at that point, she knew him as Robert Westman. They went to school together in St. Paul and were friends for a short time when they were in 7th grade. Josephina Sanchez joins me now on the phone. Josephina, great to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. So, as I said, you got to know Robert as he was going by Robert at that point, and when you were in 7th grade, and you say that very quickly you noticed a lot of disturbing things about him, that he was erratic and off. How so?
Yeah, he was very erratic. Red flags all around, but I didn't know because I was just in the 7th grade. He would salute. He would write in code and was very verbally abusive, like, towards me and just, like, his closest guy friends. And, yeah, just very verbally abusive and would salute.
What kinds of things would he say when you say he was verbally abusive?
He would call me dumb. He would just say, like, you're dumb, you don't know what you're talking about, you're dumb, you don't know what you're doing, things like that.
And when you say he used to salute, you're talking about the Nazi salute?
Yes.
And how would he do that? Just out of nowhere start doing the Heil Hitler salute?
Usually when the teachers weren't watching, or if we were unattended, you know, like in the cafeteria.
Was he bullied at all in school? Did he have any friends? Did he fit in, or was he, how was that aspect of his life?
He had friends. He I mean, we all fit in the 7th grade. We were all, like, friends. He had about, I would say, like, 5 close friends, like a small circle, but it was kind of like a small classroom. So, yeah, he had close friends.
He says in his journal, writes in his journal, that he was suspended when he was in 7th grade for talking about school shootings. Do you ever remember hearing him talk about school shootings or getting in trouble for doing so?
No, our school was very discreet. I went to St. Agnes High School with him, so our school was, like, very discreet about, like, punishment or just, like, any trouble we got into.
Yeah, because he writes in his journal as well that he reportedly was surprised that he wasn't sent to mental health counseling after getting in trouble and getting suspended in 7th grade.
Yeah, I'm very surprised about that, too.
But even then, he was virulently anti-Semitic. Do you know why or how he got like that?
Honestly, I think it revolves first around, like, family. It could have been family or just, like, mental health issues within him. That's all I can remember. Because when he was at school, he was very, like, I wouldn't say, like, the most friendliest, but he, like, had a good side to him and would just, like, talk to other people. So I don't know where it could have came from.
As we know, when he was 17 years old, he petitioned to change his name from Robert to Robin because he said in his application he wanted to identify himself as a girl. Was he struggling with his own gender when you knew him?
Nope, not at all.
Never saw any sign of that, never heard him talk about that. He didn't act or dress in any way that was effeminate.
Never.
The U.S. attorney said that his journals and all of his writing show that his heart was, quote, full of hate for everyone, for blacks, for Hispanics, for Jews, for Catholics. He himself was Catholic. He also said the journals show that he specifically wanted to hurt children and kill children and watch them suffer. I can't imagine. This is somebody you know or knew.
Yeah, it was very traumatizing, just, like, seeing his picture and then messaging my other friends, hey, is this Robert Westman from our school? And my other friends, yeah, this is him, and they were traumatized too. And I don't know, it was just very starstruck, like, just picturing me in the same classroom with him, and he could have done it earlier, you know?
But I want to be clear here. You didn't see anything that you would call a red flag, or did you?
Of course, the red flags was saluting.
The Nazi salutes.
And the codes. Of course, everyone, everything, the verbally abusive, the codes in the saluting.
I'm sorry, the what in the saluting?
Just the saluting, and then he was just fascinated with World War II.
He was fascinated with World War II? What do you mean?
Yeah. About, like, the killings and just the Nazis, how all the corporation worked.
Wow. Well, Josefina Sanchez, I really appreciate you joining us. He sounds like he was a troubled young man who clearly needed to get some help and clearly didn't. And we have seen what happens in that case. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Josefina, for joining us.
No problem. No problem.
All right. Just a few moments ago, I spoke with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey about the investigation into Westman and how the city is grappling with this tragedy. Mayor Frey, I was struck by something that the U.S. attorney said this afternoon in that press conference, that this shooter's heart was full of hate and that he was obsessed with killing children and watching them suffer. This is truly awful stuff.
What we saw was completely horrific. The complete cowardice that we saw of someone to open fire on a room full of children that were praying. It is horrific. But again, how many times have you heard politicians say exactly that? here's this horrific instance that happened, call for change, nothing happens, and then 2 months later, virtually the same thing happens in a different city. Thoughts and prayers are great. They're amazing. People gain a lot from them. And at the same time, thoughts and prayers are not enough. We need action right now. Actions are going to speak louder than words. And right now, Minneapolis is not just united in grief. We are united in action to make sure that this never happens again.
What are you going to do?
Well, first, we need a state and a federal ban on assault weapons. Second, we need a state and a federal ban on high-capacity magazines, the ability to reel off 30 shots before you even have to reload. And here's the thing. If the state and the feds are either unwilling or unable to do so because of the politics, give Minneapolis the ability to do it. We will ban those kinds of assault weapons that have been horrendous for our communities. When we've got guns that are coming into the city by the trunk load, and this happens throughout the country, when you have more guns than you have people in America, you got to recognize that there's a problem. And by the way, the solutions, these are not new solutions. Same solutions 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and 20 years ago. And other countries have experienced these kinds of horrific acts and made the decision to change. We can do the same thing in the United States of America.
So you are advocating for the city of Minneapolis to be able to impose a ban like this, even if the state of Minnesota will not?
That's right. We are preempted from doing so by state law. And of course, if we can get a state and a federal ban, that's the direction that we should ultimately go. That being said, if for some reason they are unwilling to do the thing which is so obvious, again, we're not talking about your father's hunting rifle.
Right.
We're talking about an assault rifle that can pierce through armor and that can kill dozens of people because you can reel off 30 shots at a time. Why do you need these weapons of war on our street? The answer is quite simple: you don't.
Police have said that he owned he had 3 weapons with him at the scene. You say that Westman bought all 3 of these guns over the span of 3 months in rapid succession. Is that true, first of all? And secondly, Minnesota does have a red flag law in place where weapons can be taken from somebody who poses a danger to themselves or others. No one in Westman's life noticed that he was spiraling deep into mental illness. No one noticed he was stockpiling these weapons.
I can't speak to the validity of that statement, but here's the deal. Why are you able to just keep buying a gun after gun every single month? Why is someone that is in that kind of mental state able to get these guns? I think these are answers that certainly need to be seen because there is no reason that a person that is in that mental state should be able to buy multiple guns. I don't see a whole lot of reason that people should have arsenals of guns.
Right.
And when you're able to buy that many guns every single month, it's even more likely that those guns will get into the hands of someone else that shouldn't have them.
As you know, there has been a lot of focus on the fact that the shooter was born a boy but identified recently as a girl. He changed his name several years ago from Robert to Robin. You have said it's not important to villainize the trans community, but couldn't it also be true that his or her gender dysphoria may have played a role here?
Look, villainize the person that committed this horrific act. It was cowardice. It was evil. There should be no dispute there. But anybody that is using this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community has lost sight with a sense of common humanity. Operate not out of hate for any community out there, any community. Operate out of love for our children. And when we love our children, we make the necessary change so that something like this doesn't happen again, and it's not just lip service.
Westman, according to reports emerging today in the New York Post, reportedly wrote in one of his journals, "I am tired of being trans. I wish I never brainwashed myself. I can't cut my hair now, as it would be an embarrassing defeat." Could this have been contributing to his depression, to his suicidal ideation even, perhaps?
I can't speak to what is in a different individual's brain or mind. Obviously, we love our trans community. They're suffering. We love our Catholic community. They're suffering. There was just open fire on a church, and we need to be doing everything possible to supporting them. We got to stop making this about groups of people every single time one of these things goes down. We got to stop, having the conclusion that we each want to arrive at, and then reverse engineering the facts to meet the conclusion that we've already determined. This is not about what team you're on. It should be team kids. It should be team children. We should be on team love. And the antidote to all this hate that we're seeing nationwide is not more hate. It's not villainization of a whole group.
Right.
Villainize the act.
Finally, Mayor Frey, there was a pretty iconic photo of you yesterday sitting on the steps of the Annunciation School with your head in your hands. I'm just curious what was going through your mind. It looks like your hands are in front of your face. What was going through your mind in that moment?
I have no idea. There's been a lot that has happened over the last, 24, 36 hours, whatever it's been. What I'll tell you is that I certainly saw things yesterday that I never want to have to see. There was pain that people experienced that they never should have to experience. We all have titles in our professional lives, but the titles that matter most to me are husband and dad. And while I don't remember entirely, I'm sure what I was thinking about are my kids. I've got a 4 3/4-year-old girl, and I have a 3-week-year-old, and we should be thinking about these kids that got killed and hurt yesterday, not as just somebody else's kids. Think of them as your own. How would you feel? And let that motivate us to make the change.
Jacob Frey, Mayor of Minneapolis, I appreciate you joining us at a time when your city is going through a lot of heartbreak right now. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, coming up for us, there is a fine line between necessary disruption and destructive chaos. Has it just been crossed at the CDC? Several top officials have either quit or been fired, and their statements are scathing. The White House just announced its new pick for director, so just what's going on over there? We'll have the latest in a moment. And then later, we have a NewsNation exclusive.
My government used me like I was a guinea pig.
They say the U.S. government sprayed them with dangerous chemicals without their knowledge or consent. And decades later, they are suffering from severe illnesses, including rare cancers. NewsNation's Natasha Zuvez investigates what was in the spray. Coming up. There is disarray at the CDC tonight as the White House and the health secretary are trying to fire the new CDC director. Susan Menares was just confirmed by the Senate a mere 27 days ago. And like so many officials the Trump administration has tried to fire in recent months, she is refusing to go quietly. Menares is an infectious disease researcher. She was sworn in as one of America's top public health officials by Health Secretary RFK Jr. just last month. So what happened? Well, a source tells NewsNation that the two had a very big argument. Menares was asked to resign and that she refused. The disagreement came after Menares refused to pull approvals for several COVID vaccines and that she resisted moves to change the childhood vaccine schedule for things like hepatitis B and measles and mumps, all under the pressure from RFK Jr. A total of 4 other top CDC officials then resigned in protest after Kennedy ordered Menares out. Three of those people were escorted off CDC premises to a crowd of cheering and applauding colleagues. They are accusing Kennedy of putting, quote, hundreds of millions of American lives at risk and, quote, weaponizing public health for political gain. NewsNation's Joe Khalil is live in Washington with more. Joe, Menares is telling friends that she was asked to sign off on changes that she had said was a red line for her.
Yeah, and I think I just have to start off, Elizabeth, by emphasizing how unusual all of this is, that you would have this kind of shakeup at the Centers for Disease Control just a month into the new director's time. But here we are, Susan Menarez on her way out the door for the exact reason that you've just laid out, Elizabeth. They've already got a temporary replacement for her. Jim O'Neill will serve as acting director. He's the number 2 here at Health and Human Services, number 2 only to the Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Don't know what O'Neill's views are on vaccines and vaccine policy, but it is going to be important because that is where Menarez and Kennedy butted heads in a core, serious way. These differences, obviously, they couldn't get past. Secretary Kennedy talked about this earlier today in really scathing criticism of the CDC as a whole, saying top to bottom, it needs a change. He even said the agency was rife with misinformation. Take a listen.
There's a lot of trouble at CDC, and it's going to require getting rid of some people over the long term in order for us to change the institutional culture and bring back pride and self-esteem and make that agency the stellar agency that it's always been.
All right, Elizabeth, we may even see congressional investigations around these departures and firings.
Yeah, we've had several congressmen call for investigations. Other congressmen have called, and senators have called for RFK Jr. himself to be fired and are warning this puts a lot of people's health at risk. The politics would be different, Joe, if this was just talking about COVID vaccines. We're not. We're talking about childhood vaccines that have been used safely and doctors say have saved many lives for decades now.
That's exactly right. Dr. Menarez said that the reason, through her attorneys, the reason that she could not move forward, she says she didn't want to rubber stamp policies that removed the approvals of several of these vaccines that she says the medical community has agreed were safe and were effective vaccines. And so that is her big issue. She says she would rather leave than to support and rubber stamp policies she says are just meant to be driving a political agenda here. And that's why she had all of this support from several of her top officials at the CDC as well, even those that came out today and basically said that they're going to follow her lead rather than continue to work there, even though they support the work generally of the CDC.
All right. Something tells me we haven't heard the last of this one. Joe Khalil. Wow, what a story. Thank you so much. Coming up, during the Cold War, the United States Army sprayed their St. Louis neighborhood with a chemical that contains a known carcinogen. Well, tonight, residents are asking, could there have been something even more dangerous in that spray that was spread throughout their neighborhood? NewsNation's Natasha Zuvez investigates next. Now to a NewsNation exclusive investigation into a secret government experiment that was carried out in St. Louis. Residents tell us they still remember a mysterious fog. Children would run through it. Mothers would try and close their windows against it. For decades, they all had questions, and now we're seeking answers. The United States Army now admits that it sprayed a chemical that contained cadmium, a known carcinogen, on a neighborhood of more than 10,000 people. Critics say this was done with no warning and no consent. Well, tonight we return to the site of that demolished neighborhood and speak with former residents who believe the government turned them into human test subjects. Although the Army admits that the test happened, it is not admitted to harming the residents. NewsNation's Natasha Zuvez investigates what was in the fog and why the truth may still be buried.
The fog drifted through the streets like a ghost.
That's exactly what it looked like, a thick fog.
It was summertime and it was hot. We would just run through it as fast as we could and try to just cool ourselves off. It stuck to you.
The spray was so foul as far as the odor. It made some of us have headaches, nausea, dizziness.
That's what I remember. It made me sick.
It wasn't the weather. It was an eerie smoke descending from rooftops, rolling from the backs of trucks.
Regular flatbed truck, but it had a big machine on the back. And it had a big nozzle that really sprayed a fog you couldn't even see through. It was that thick. And it really, we felt it as it would adhere to our skin. And as far as the guys on top of the buildings, they tried to portray them to us as maintenance workers. But we was like, what is a maintenance worker doing? And basically a hazmat suit. And they had masks and goggles.
In the 1950s and 60s, in secret, the U.S. Army sprayed zinc cadmium sulfide into the air of a St. Louis housing project, a largely black neighborhood called Pruitt-Igoe.
It was a lose-lose situation for us in Pruitt-Igoe. We were subjects. We were subjects.
They didn't ask for our permission. We didn't ask for them to spray us. My government used me like I was a guinea pig.
We're standing at where Pruitt-Igoe used to be here in St. Louis, and it's hard to believe more than 10,000 people used to live here. As we bring our drone up, you can see it's mostly just an empty lot now, overgrown with trees. This used to be filled with 33 high-rise buildings. It was all demolished in 1976. And according to the National Research Council, St. Louis was chosen for spraying experiments because it had similar characteristics to Soviet targets like Moscow in terms of population density and terrain and proximity to a river.
The government now admits to a secretive series of Cold War tests, including one dubbed large area coverage. More than 30 tests conducted across the U.S. and Canada, spraying zinc cadmium sulfide from planes, rooftops, and vehicles to simulate how a biological attack might spread, all to prepare for potential warfare against the Soviets.
Many of us been in the military and had top secret clearances. We know how it works.
We have died for America. We have fought for America.
You are a veteran.
I am United States Air Force veteran.
Dr. Starks, you're a veteran as well, isn't
Yes, I am. I'm an Air Force veteran also.
Is there a sense of betrayal here?
Definitely, definitely.
They want to know if those secret tests have anything to do with what they're observing with their own eyes.
I lost my two older siblings to cancer. I lost a brother last month.
I've been diagnosed recently with a rare form of lymphoma.
I had cancer of the left kidney, had partial removal of my left kidney.
NewsNation reached out to the Army for answers. They provided a one-page response. It says the Army's own Center for Health Promotion and Preventive Medicine investigated in 1994 and found inhalation exposure would not pose a health risk. They also cite later corroborating reviews, including a 1997 review by the National Research Council. Perhaps they assumed we wouldn't read the NRC's 380-page report, but we did, and the Army's statement doesn't show the full picture. In that 1997 review, the National Research Council explicitly says repeated exposure to zinc cadmium sulfide can cause kidney or bone toxicity or lung cancer if levels are high enough. And they admitted they couldn't fully assess the risk. Why? Because some Army records remain classified, it says, for national security reasons. More troubling, key Army exposure records were missing, and when the NRC asked the Army to supply them, the Army said it couldn't find them. Finally, the NRC considered conducting its own study, but concluded it wasn't feasible. In short, it did not test the site, collect samples, or test residents, and they didn't have access to all the data. Their review was based on what the Army gave them, and what the Army either could not find or withheld. The Army ends its statement to NewsNation by saying, quote, none of the reports contained evidence of a radioactive component to the zinc cadmium sulfide dispersion tests. Residents say the secrecy and delays are no accident.
They're waiting us out.
They're waiting on all of us to die.
But that's not even the whole story, as residents demand to know what else could have been in that spray.
They have not come clean with what was in there.
Do you believe that it was just zinc cadmium sulfide in that spray?
No.
No.
We go to the source, a researcher who has spent decades declassifying government documents about these tests.
Do you believe the U.S. government sprayed some kind of radioactive material on the residents of St. Louis?
I believe that they did.
And the government's surprising response to our request to declassify information.
I mean, what the hell?
Plus, renowned activist Erin Brockovich weighs in.
Do you think there's been a lie here, a cover-up here?
It sure looks that way.
The residents are asking for an apology from the government for being experimented on. They are asking for compensation, for health studies for themselves and their children. They're also asking for transparency. They want the government to release all the documents about the spraying. So, Elizabeth, tomorrow night on your show, we will go on a journey to try to declassify the one government document that a key researcher tells us she has never been able to expose. And we take the investigation to Erin Brockovich. For the residents still here, still fighting, the question is whether they will get any answers before it's too late. Elizabeth.
Well, they have a better chance of it with you on the case. Natasha Zuvez, thank you so much. All right, coming up for us, it's been 13 days since President Trump and Vladimir Putin's Alaska summit, but there's still no peace and plenty of war, with Russia launching its first major attack since that day on Kyiv, killing at least 23 people. We're live from Ukraine when we come back. To Ukraine now, where despite those high-profile meetings over the past 2 weeks, talk of peace seems naive at best, delusional at worst. The largest bombardment by Russia in weeks has left at least 23 people dead and dozens wounded in Kyiv. The barrage of several hundred missiles and drones was the first major combined attack on the Ukrainian capital since President Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska just 2 weeks ago. Trump hoped that meeting would lead to a peace deal to end this war. But in the 2 weeks since the big Alaska summit, Russia has launched more than 2,200 drones at Ukraine. It has also launched a powerful missile. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said it shows Moscow has chosen ballistics instead of the negotiating table, while German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said a Putin-Zelensky summit anytime soon is highly doubtful. For more, let's go live to NewsNation correspondent Robert Sherman, who is in Kyiv. What are you hearing there, Robert, on the prospect of any talks and on the bombing campaign?
Now, when it comes to the Ukrainian public here, Elizabeth, they look at nights like we had overnight here. Their optimism is about as low as it could get, that peace is on the horizon. We're talking about nearly 600 drones, 30 ballistic missiles pounding sites all across Kyiv. We were there at some of those blast zones here today where people have been picking up the rubble. And those who were on the ground as all this happened say whole blocks at a time were rocked by these strikes. Take a listen.
Big bangs in the distance, machine gun fire, and the sound of Shahed drones that sound like lawnmowers flying over. My window completely came through. All the doors were smashed off the hinges because of the shockwave. From that, big cloud of dust came in everywhere. I was coughing, filled my lungs.
Some of the sites that saw major damage include the European Union building on the ground here in Kyiv, as well as the British Council. As a result of all of this, you saw both the UK and the EU summoning their Russian ambassadors in their respective country. President Zelensky saying tonight that based off of these attacks, what he's seen, no optimism that Russia is serious about coming to the table. Elizabeth?
There's no sign of that happening right now. Robert Sherman, thank you so much. All right, coming up, we're going to go back to our top story on that horrific shooting that left 2 kids dead in Minnesota. Chris Cuomo joins me live next. All right, couple minutes and we'll go back to our lead story, which of course is this awful tragedy in Minnesota. Chris Cuomo joins me now. Chris, I was just speaking to a student who went to school with him, and she said as far back as 10 years ago, he was doing Hitler salutes, obsessed with World War II, verbally abusive to kids around him, suspended from school, according to his own journals, for idolizing mass school shooters. There were red flags for a long time.
Only if you decide to see and or wave them, depending on which metaphor you prefer. I really believe, look, of course, we can do better with who gets weapons and how. Go back and look at the numbers during the assault weapons ban versus now. Other things have accounted for this growth towards violence as well, but this is one of them, and I'm a gun owner. But there's more to it than that. And we just don't want to have the conversation. We just don't want to work on it. You and I have decided to make our lives instructions in this. We'll talk about mental health. We'll talk about our own journeys and what we've learned and what we haven't. But as a society, we don't want to deal with what we have to do to identify and help and isolate threats like this. We don't want to do it. So they'll say, well, there's just a few of them. Suicide plus this is almost 60% of all gun deaths in this country. And they're all related.
What do you think about the fact that police said today they have still not spoken to the mother? Listen, I don't want this to come out the wrong way. You and I are both parents. Our kids are around the same age, which is around the same age or slightly younger than this gunman in this case. But I don't know. I found myself wondering over and over again, why didn't that mother or somebody else in that family recognize what was happening with this person?
Yeah, unless counsel got in the way, she doesn't want to, whatever it is, or she's too freaked out. If there's something like that, that aside, it doesn't make any sense. And yes, she had to know something. Yes, people around this guy had to know something. I'm not judging them because they haven't been taught or encouraged or expected to do anything about it. But that's what we have to talk about. We have to change. But I'll tell you what bothers me, Elizabeth.
What?
You and I, NewsNation, we're the only ones running with this story like it happened today. This is on the fade. As my son likes to say, fade you. This story is on the fade. It's not even in the top trending topics on social media anymore.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem.
Well, they're back to the CDC and all the politics of everything else. Everybody loves to make everything all about politics these days.
Yeah, you
Anyway.
don't want to keep talking about dead kids en masse when you can talk about whether the COVID vaccine has nanotechnology in it.
Yeah, or mitochondrial, dysfunction can be recognized by somebody's face in an airport. Chris Cuomo.
Anyway, I got to jump.
Have a
I
great
could talk
show.
to you all night, Elizabeth.
Me too,
But then I'd get
same.
fired. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.